Welcome back to Way to Fluency. Today we're diving deep into one of the most powerful, yet often underestimated tools for learning English, reading books. And when I say reading books, I'm not talking about boring, old-fashioned grammar-focused reading. I'm talking about stories that pull you in, worlds that make you forget you're even reading in another language.
That's the secret, right? Because when you get lost in a story, you're not just reading, you're living in English. And that's when real learning happens, naturally and without stress.
Exactly. I'll be honest, I didn't always love reading in English. In the beginning, I thought, why should I read in English when I can just watch videos or listen to podcasts? But the truth is, reading gave me something none of those could, a chance to slow down and see how English really works, word by word, sentence by sentence.
And for me, reading was what pushed me from understanding English in short bursts, like in songs or movies, to actually thinking in English. I remember my first real English book was The Hobbit. At first, it felt impossible, but slowly, page after page, my brain started connecting patterns. Words I saw once in chapter 1 appeared again in chapter 4, but in a slightly different way. That's when I realized, oh, this is how native speakers actually use these words.
That's so true. Reading gives you natural repetition. The same expressions, structures, and words appear over and over again in different contexts, which is exactly what you need to remember them. You're not forcing memorization. You're letting the story do the work.
And here's something that surprises a lot of learners. You don't have to understand every single word. In fact, it's better if you don't stop to look up every new word. The context will often give you the meaning naturally.
I remember when I came across the word alibi for the first time in a mystery novel. I had no idea what it meant, but I didn't stop to look it up. As I kept reading, I realized it meant proof that someone was somewhere else during a crime. I learned the word without a dictionary, and I've never forgotten it.
That's the beauty of context learning. And the more you read, the more your brain gets used to filling in the gaps automatically. It's almost like a puzzle. You see the picture even if some pieces are missing.
And here's another advantage. When you read, you're learning complete sentences and seeing how ideas connect. You notice transitions, emotional expressions, even the rhythm of English. This is something listening alone can't give you in the same way.
Plus, reading can give you something incredibly valuable: conversation material. When you finish a good book, you have stories, opinions, and even jokes you can share with others. That's when your English becomes more than just words. It becomes a bridge to connect with people.
Yes. I once met a group of travelers who loved a book series I had read in English. We spent hours talking about it, and I felt completely comfortable because I knew the vocabulary and expressions from the story.
That's why I always say, reading is not just about language. It's about living experiences in another language.
And in the next part, we're going to talk about how to choose the right books for your English level so you can enjoy the process and still make huge progress.
So now that we know reading is a game changer for learning English, the big question is, how do you choose the right books? Because let's be honest, if the book is too hard, you'll feel frustrated. And if it's too easy, you'll get bored.
Exactly. Choosing the right book is like finding the perfect pair of shoes. If it fits, you'll want to keep walking. If it doesn't, you'll stop after a few steps. And here's the good news. You don't need to start with classics or academic texts.
Yes, a lot of people think they have to read Shakespeare or old literature to really learn English. But if you're at a beginner or intermediate level, that's like running a marathon on your first day of training.
Instead, think about your personal interests first. What kind of stories do you already enjoy in your native language? Mystery, romance, self-help, fantasy, biographies? When you choose a book in a genre you love, your brain is more motivated to keep reading, even if you face some difficult words.
That's exactly what happened to me with mystery novels. I was hooked on detective stories in my native language. So when I started reading them in English, the suspense kept me turning the pages. Even when I didn't understand a word, I wanted to know who the criminal was, so I kept going.
Another tip is to start with graded readers. These are books written for learners, with vocabulary adapted to specific levels. They're great for building confidence because you can finish them quickly and still feel the satisfaction of completing a whole book.
Absolutely. And here's a little secret. You can also read children's books or young adult novels. They're often full of rich vocabulary, but the sentence structures are simpler. Plus, they tend to be really engaging.
I remember reading Harry Potter in English for the first time. I was nervous, but because I already knew the story from the movies, I could follow along easily. And every time I saw a word like wand, spell, or cloak, it stuck in my mind because I could see it in my imagination.
That's another great tip. If you already know the story in your language, it's much easier to read it in English. You can focus on the language instead of trying to follow a completely new plot.
Also, don't be afraid to mix formats. You can read the printed book while listening to the audiobook at the same time. That way, you connect the pronunciation to the spelling and reinforce your understanding.
Yes. And one more thing, always check the 5-finger rule. Open a page at random and read it. If you find more than 5 words you don't understand, it might be too hard for now. If you find fewer than 5, it's probably a good fit.
That's a simple but powerful way to avoid frustration. Because here's the truth, the best book for learning English is the one you'll actually finish.
And finishing a book gives you a sense of achievement that motivates you to start the next one. That's how reading becomes a habit, and habits lead to fluency.
In the next part, we'll explore how to make reading more active, turning it from a passive activity into a powerful learning experience without killing the fun.
So, Clara, we've picked the right books. But here's something I've noticed. A lot of people read passively. They go through the pages, enjoy the story, but at the end, they realize they didn't really learn much English from it.
Yes, that's so common. And it's because when you read passively, your brain is focused on the plot, not the language. You enjoy the ride, but you don't collect the treasures along the way.
Exactly. That's why we need to make reading active, but in a way that doesn't make it feel like homework. Because if you turn it into a boring study session, you'll lose motivation.
Right.
So here's my approach. While reading, I keep a small notebook or a notes app open. Whenever I see a word or phrase that catches my attention, maybe it's new, maybe it's familiar but used in a new way, I quickly jot it down. I don't stop to look it up right away because that would interrupt the flow of reading.
I do the same thing. I highlight the word, make a small note, and then keep going. The important thing is to keep the momentum. You can always come back later and explore the meaning.
Another thing I love is writing down chunks, groups of words that appear together naturally. For example, instead of just noting the word rain, you write heavy rain or caught in the rain. This way, you're learning language the way native speakers actually use it.
Yes, and when you see a phrase in its natural habitat, inside a story, connected to an emotion or situation, it sticks much better than if you just saw it on a vocabulary list.
Let's not forget mental images. If the book says, she tiptoed across the room, you can picture her moving quietly on her toes. That mental movie helps you remember the word tiptoe instantly.
Another powerful trick is to read aloud sometimes. Not the whole book, of course, but certain parts that you like. It forces you to notice pronunciation, rhythm, and intonation.
And if you're shy about reading aloud, you can whisper to yourself or just mouth the words silently. Even that engages more of your senses and reinforces learning.
I also love rereading powerful sentences. Sometimes I'll go back to a paragraph I really enjoyed and read it again slowly. Not to memorize it, but to feel the way the words fit together.
Yes, that's one of the pleasures of reading in another language. Discovering how sentences are built, how emotions are expressed, how humor is created. It's like seeing the secret architecture behind the story.
And all this happens without forcing yourself into heavy grammar drills. You're still enjoying the book, but at the same time, you're actively collecting vocabulary, expressions, and style.
Exactly.
It's like going for a walk and coming home with your pockets full of interesting little treasures you found along the way.
In the next part, we'll talk about how to connect what you read to your own life. So, The vocabulary doesn't just stay in the book, but actually becomes part of your speaking.
So, David, we've talked about reading actively, but here's the thing. If you just leave new vocabulary inside the book, it won't help you much in conversation.
Exactly. It's like borrowing something and never actually using it yourself. The real transformation happens when you take those words out of the book and bring them into your own world.
One way I do that is by relating scenes or sentences from the book to my own experiences. Let's say I read, "He wandered through the empty streets, lost in thought." I might think of a time when I walked through my neighborhood late at night, just thinking about life. Suddenly, that word wander has a personal memory attached to it.
Yes. And when a word is connected to a real moment in your life, your brain treats it like an old friend, not a stranger. You're much more likely to use it naturally later.
Another method I love is rephrasing. I'll take a sentence from the book and rewrite it about myself. For example, if the book says she couldn't hide her excitement, I might write in my notebook, "I couldn't hide my excitement when I booked my trip to London." Now, I'm practicing the same structure, but it's mine.
That's powerful. And it's not just vocabulary. You're learning patterns, the invisible grammar that native speakers use without thinking.
Right.
And sometimes I even steal expressions from characters. If I find a phrase that's interesting or funny, I'll try to slip it into a real conversation that week.
That's something I do too. It feels like adding a new tool to my toolbox. And you'd be surprised. Even with just 2 or 3 new phrases from a book, your conversations can feel richer and more natural.
And you don't have to wait until you finish the book. You can start using the language you pick up from chapter 1.
Absolutely. Another trick is storytelling. After finishing a chapter, I'll tell someone about it. Not word for word, but in my own way. That forces me to recall the vocabulary and expressions, but also adapt them to my style.
And if you don't have someone to tell, you can record yourself on your phone. It's a great way to see how the new words actually sound when you say them.
Plus, listening back can help you notice if you're missing opportunities to use those new expressions.
The key idea here is this. Reading gives you the ingredients, but you have to cook the meal yourself. Otherwise, you just collect words without ever tasting them.
Well said. And in the final part, we'll explore how to keep reading as a lifelong habit, so your English keeps improving without feeling like a chore.
So, David, we've covered choosing the right books, reading actively, and connecting what we read to our own lives. But there's one more step, making reading a habit that stays with you for years.
Exactly. Because no matter how motivated you feel today, there will be days when you're tired, busy, or just not in the mood to read. If you want lasting progress, you need a system that makes reading feel natural, like brushing your teeth.
For me, that starts with creating a reading ritual. I have a small corner in my house with a comfortable chair, a blanket, and good lighting. When I sit there, my brain knows this is reading time. It's almost automatic.
That's a great tip. I do something similar, but I also attach reading to another daily habit. For example, I always read for 10 minutes after breakfast. No decisions, no excuses. It's just part of my morning.
And if I know I'll have a busy day, I carry my book with me, or I use an e-reader app on my phone. That way, even if I'm waiting for the bus or sitting in a cafe, I can read a few pages.
Those little moments add up fast. People often think they need an hour to read, but even 5 minutes here and there can keep the habit alive.
Absolutely. And here's another secret. Don't force yourself to finish books you don't enjoy. If a book feels like a punishment, you'll avoid reading. Give yourself permission to put it aside and choose something that excites you.
Yes, reading should be something you look forward to. That positive feeling is what keeps the habit strong.
Also, celebrate your progress. When you finish a book in English, take a moment to realize how far you've come. A few months ago, you might have thought it was impossible, and now you've done it.
That's such a good point. Learning a language is a long journey, and recognizing those little victories keeps you motivated.
And finally, Remember that reading is not just about vocabulary or grammar. It's about entering new worlds, feeling emotions, and seeing life through different perspectives, all in English.
And the more you read, the more naturally English will flow into your conversations, your thoughts, and even your dreams.
Exactly.
So, whether you're starting with children's books, short stories, or a novel you've always wanted to read, make it a daily habit. Let books be your constant companion in this language learning journey.
And who knows, one day you might look back and realize that reading wasn't just a method to learn English. It was one of the most enjoyable parts of your life.
I couldn't agree more. And that's it for today's episode of Way to Fluency. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope this inspires you to pick up a book in English today and start your own reading adventure.
Happy reading, everyone, and see you next time.